huge day. And I have the perfect team to help me break all of it down. Philippe Ryan is former Deputy Assistant Secretary of State under President Obama. He's also the co-host of the podcast Unredacted. Ambassador Bill Courtney served as President Clinton's Special Assistant for Russia, Ukraine, and Eurasia. Evan McMullin, former CIA operative, former Chief Policy Director for the House Republican Conference, and former independent presidential candidate. And Rick Stengel is here, thank God, sitting next to me. I need help today. He served as Undersecretary of State for Public Diplomacy and Public Affairs in the Obama administration. Philippe, I turn to you first. What do you make of this? The fact that the president decided to suspend military aid before he made the call to the president of Ukraine?
Well, obviously, it's pretty egregious, but I think there's two things to remember that tie together on Ukraine. On Ukraine, you know, the president has had several vulnerable moments since he took office, moments where the whole political establishment has waited or outright criticized him. One was firing Jim Comey. Another was the revelation that Don Jr. had his meeting in Trump Tower, Charlottesville, Helsinki, and now this. And what's interesting about those moments is that his typical defenders, whether it's Lindsey Graham or Jim Jordan, they have to be quiet for a period of days because, one, they don't know, and two, they are uncomfortable. And what's particularly problematic, following up on what you were just saying about the White House releasing the transcript, is right now people assume the worst. But the problem here is that everyone is looking for a quid pro quo. And maybe it's there, and maybe the transcript says it. It's unlikely the transcript is going to be so flat out. But that doesn't matter. The moment that Donald Trump said to a foreign leader, "Help me get dirt on Joe Biden," the minute those two words, Joe Biden, came out of his mouth, he crossed such a serious red line that's what needs to be focused on. And that's what the House Democrats are focusing on.
Okay, but what does crossing a serious red line actually mean, Richard? What are the consequences? Because we've been talking about crossing red lines for the last 2.5 years. And you know what the White House does? They smile and wink back at us.
You know, I was reading this morning about the debates of about the Constitution in 1787, and Madison said...
It's a normal thing to read
yes,
on a
exactly.
Tuesday
Well, I was waiting to see you.
I do that most mornings.
I hear people laughing in the background at that.
That, of course, is
okay.
Philippe.
And the...
I did, too. I just didn't show off about it.
I was there. So Madison talked about how one of the impetuses for impeachment is the corrupt use of a foreign power. That is a textbook example of what Donald Trump did with Ukraine. Philippe is right. There doesn't need to be an explicit quid pro quo. When you're talking to the President of the United States and you give $300 million in aid, there's an automatic quid pro quo right there. And remember also, Trump was the person who criticized the Obama administration for not giving military aid to Ukraine to defend against Russia's invasion of eastern Ukraine. Poor Ukraine is boxed in by Donald Trump on one side and Russia on the other. I mean, during UNGA, this is an example to 200 nations around the world about how corrupt our foreign policy is.
Yikes. Ambassador, I want to play part of what the president said yesterday about the idea of putting pressure on the Ukrainian leader.
There was no pressure put on them whatsoever. I put no pressure on them whatsoever. I could have. I think it would probably, possibly have been okay if I did. But I didn't. I didn't put any pressure on them whatsoever. You know why? Because they want to do the right thing, and they know about corruption, and they probably know that Joe Biden and his son are corrupt.
Okay. Ambassador, to Rick's very point, how boxed in the Ukrainian leader is, given the political environment, put yourself in his shoes. Even if the president did not explicitly connect the military aid to the Biden investigation, why would the president even bring that up on a phone call like this?
It's unclear why he did. For example, from the standpoint of President Zelensky of Ukraine, he wants to maintain bipartisan support in the United States for Ukraine. In fact, Ukraine has it. The Congress voted almost unanimously a couple years ago for sanctions on Russia, in part because of its aggression in Ukraine, in part because of election interference, almost unanimously. President Trump didn't like the bill, but he signed it because a veto would have been overridden. President Zelensky wants to maintain that bipartisan support. He has every interest in avoiding getting involved in a domestic political struggle in the United States.
Evan, do you believe there could be any innocent explanation for all of this? Are the president's critics in any way looking for a predetermined outcome?
Well, I think we would all be well advised to wait for the facts, but not just wait, but pursue them, pursue more facts. But we already have a number of them that I think are enough for us to know that this is quite important. It does represent a new threat to the core of our democracy. We have to keep in mind here that, you know, people bringing these accusations on the president, it's not the press. It's not Democrats in Congress. It's an intelligence officer who filed a whistleblower complaint and a Trump appointee who's the Intelligence Community Inspector General who looked at that complaint and said, yes, this is urgent and important for Congress to know about, and has gone around his bosses to inform Congress of this. This is a Trump appointee. So I think that fact alone should give us concern. But we also know that Trump and his administration, through his personal attorney and Trump himself, and I wonder about Pence, frankly, and potentially others, have been openly pursuing this in Ukraine and for quite some time. And in fact, I wonder if this started before the new Ukrainian president came to power. I mean, he's new in Kiev. I wonder if this administration, if the Trump administration had engaged with the prior Ukrainian administration. Was there a deal with that administration? Did they have some understanding? What was their posture vis-a-vis the administration's possible requests that they investigate and dig up dirt on Joe Biden? And either way, as Philippe said, this is completely unacceptable for the president of the United States to dangle and to leverage U.S. power, the power of the presidency ultimately, to compel a foreign country to assist illegally in his reelection. That's what we're seeing here. I think we have facts enough to know that this is what's happening. Let's get more facts, but I think we have enough facts to know that what we're seeing here is election interference 2.0 from President Trump.
Rick, how do we actually get more facts? At this point, there are so many different narratives about the president's conduct and his presidency that are being pursued. The White House blocks it. It then goes to the courts. We're waiting, we're waiting, we're waiting. How do we actually get those facts? Do you feel any level of confidence besides vote this person out of office that we're going to get answers?
I do. I mean, remember, the statute, the whistleblower statute says this is for Congress to peruse and look at. This is about separation of powers, and I think this is one of the things that will get Congress active in terms of this is our prerogative.
Congress has been active.
They subpoena the whistleblower's report, which I would argue is probably maybe even more important than a transcript of the conversation, because it might be a fuller picture of what was going on before and after the call.
And you think that subpoena will result in them getting something? Think about all the subpoenas that have already been submitted. And again, the White House takes them and throws them in the garbage.
But then Congress has to get some gumption and start pursuing it, and this could be potentially part of impeachment charges, right, ignoring subpoenas. Let me make one other point that every other person on this interview would understand, and why we're in such uncharted water. Any other president of the United States, before he began his call with the president of Ukraine, there would be a group of people around him or her saying, "Sir, under no circumstances can you possibly ever mention or even hint about anything having to do with a political adversary on your call, or even the idea that there's some quid pro quo for you to do something. That's an absolute red line, sir. You cannot mention that under any circumstances."
But you knew that would never happen. He won on let Trump be Trump.
Well, let Trump be Trump may be his downfall, too.